I'm Rocco Migliori, Superintendent of Westmoreland Central School District. I'd like to, on behalf of our Board of Education, our Board President, Mr. John Acey, and the entire staff, welcome everybody to Westmoreland for this first in a series of 3 education forums that Senator Griffo has put together for our region. And before I introduce Senator Griffo, we just want to take the opportunity to certainly thank him for hosting these forums here locally. I don't think it's any surprise to anybody in this room that it hasn't been the easiest go for the last 5 or 6 years in public education. We've had numerous conversations with the senator, both senators, over the past 4, 5, 6 years, and they've always been willing to listen and help us out. So we certainly want to begin by thanking them and telling them how much we appreciate always listening to us. Senator Griffo has always been there to not only help but also ask clarifying questions if there was an issue he didn't understand. So we certainly appreciate that. And before I turn it over to them, I'd also like to introduce BOCES Superintendent, Oneida BOCES Superintendent Howard Mettleman. Also we have Jackie Starks from Madison Oneida BOCES and Mark Vivacqua from Herkimer BOCES, who will be with us this evening. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce to you the Senator of the 47th District, Joseph Griffo.
Thank you. It's pretty good for a science teacher. His math isn't bad. Well, thank you all for being here tonight. I really appreciate that. And before I introduce our special guest tonight, I'd like to also introduce a colleague of mine in state government. He is the assemblyman who represents this area. Comes from Jefferson County. He represents the 117th Assembly District, Assemblyman Ken Blankenbush. Ken has been a great partner. He came on a couple of years ago, and I've really enjoyed working with him. We've been doing some very good things together, and I appreciate his work and his cooperation. We do our best to try to make sure that we continue to communicate and work together, something that maybe they could take a lesson on in Washington. So what I thought, talking to a lot of individuals, particularly in education and people across the community, that it would be a great opportunity if we could afford parents, teachers, administrators, board members, an opportunity to interact with some of the key players in the educational process. Because we all know that there are significant challenges that are facing our educational institutions and programs and policies. And I thought it would be a different kind of approach if we could bring some of the people to all of you and to encourage the public to get involved and engage in the process. So that's what motivated this series. I want to now start by introducing the chairman, who will say a few words, and then the important thing tonight is that you get to communicate with all of us, and particularly with the chairman. We all recognize, and I know many of you do, that a lot of the policy and the regulations are promulgated in Albany at the State Ed Department and with the Board of Regents, but the legislature obviously and the governor have a role, and I think that's why it's important that you have this type of interaction with some of the individuals who are in that process. Senator Flanagan is we're very fortunate to have him here. Senator represents the Senate 2nd District in Long Island. He is a former member of the Assembly and is now, I think, in his 11th year in the Senate. How's my math? Okay, good. 11th year in the Senate. I've gotten to know Senator Flanagan. I've been there 7 years now. 7 and 11, 2 good numbers. He was somebody that immediately was very helpful to me when I came to Albany, extended himself and was willing to help me in any way that I needed relative to what had been going on, issues operational or policy, and I really appreciate his guidance and his friendship as I took on a new role in Albany. But I also came to get to know the senator and really respect him as a leader. He has now chaired the Education Committee for the last this is now going into the 4th year. And I'll tell you, he is an individual who not only takes this seriously, but has really traveled this state to try to interact with communities, upstate, downstate, urban, rural, and I really appreciate the time and effort because he has the same duties that I do in Assemblyman Blankenbush. He has to tend to the issues of his district, but he's really taken time to ensure that he really brings himself into other communities across the state so that you can have the interaction. And he has been here several times. We have had him meeting with school boards before and superintendents before. So this is, I think, the third trip to our area, and I really appreciate that he has had really made the effort to make the time to do this, as I said, because there are a lot of things on his plate. So I want to first extend my appreciation and gratitude to Senator Flanagan for his willingness to continue to move across the state and to meet with groups and individuals, and for continuing to come back here. And we're not even, we don't feed him as, we can even feed him better than we do, right, Rock? We got some great food here, and he's had an opportunity to have some of it, but I really appreciate him coming here. And as I said, he is an extraordinary leader, very talented individual. He is at the table during the budget process with the executive staff when we're negotiating issues of education. He has begun a series of hearings across the state to assess the regents, some of the reforms the regents have put in, and he's assessing the progress and the impact, and I think that is so important. It's the only committee, the only branch of government, the Senate right now, that is truly bringing out the Senate Education Committee to assess what is happening in education across the state. We all know some of the issues we're dealing with, whether they're test scores, evaluations, Common Core, funding. There are just so many issues that really challenge education and those involved in education today. So Senator Flanagan has begun that hearing process, and today he was in Syracuse, and that's why we appreciate him making a stop here tonight to continue. And this is a more unique opportunity again, because it'll be a direct dialogue. So with that, I'm going to now introduce to you the chair of the Senate Education Committee, John Flanagan.
Okay. Thank you, Joe, very much, and thank you to the superintendent and the folks here at Westmoreland. I saw one of the board members had on the Westmoreland Bulldogs shirt, so there you go, okay. I was asking how the team was doing, and I was getting a little bit of factual information, but we did hear about how well the marching band has done. We're state champs, right, a couple of years ago? 2 years in a row, okay, great. Anyway, it is very nice to be here. We were in Syracuse today, and I'll give you a couple examples, right? So I knew it was important to get here on time. So we left Syracuse without going to Dinosaur Barbecue, okay? But I had very nice pizza inside, so I'm not complaining. And I'll give you another little example that I have been here, because one of my hospitality gifts, last time I was here, I got the Rome Academy fleece, and I also got turkey bones. Okay, so you know, turkey joints, all right. They look like bones to me, all right? See, you can tell I was here, but you can tell I don't live here, all right? Anyway, it's very nice to be here, and I have done a lot of traveling. I just want to give you a little bit of background. I want to be very clear about a couple of things. I am more than happy to answer questions and take comments. I promise if I don't know the answer, I'm not going to make it up. We will get back to you. I'm elated to see students here. Absolutely. I'm elated to see a little baby in the back enjoying the comments. If the baby starts crying, that's a sign that maybe I should stop talking. But it is important to travel around, and this is my third year chairing the Education Committee. As Joe said, going into the fourth year. I have served 27 years in the legislature, 16 in the Assembly, and now 11 in the Senate. So I have experience. That doesn't make me smarter than anybody in the room by any stretch. I just have a wealth of experience. And I sit as one of the 25 members on the Governor's Education Reform Commission. The reason that's important to people in this room is I'm the Senate representative on behalf of my colleagues and with the blessing of our leader, Dean Skelos. But we have had a series of hearings last year. We've had a number of meetings this year. There were 11 hearings last summer and going into the early fall. I was the only member of the commission who traveled to every one of them in every part of the state. And it was excellent because I got a chance to interact with some really good people in various communities and learn a lot. So that's one component. Second component is we have a number of our members who sit as members of the Education Committee. We work closely together. We do work closely together. I don't care what you read or what you may hear. I have an excellent working relationship with the senator, and he is, you know what, you can't really, I don't think you can overstate this. Joe's a good guy. He's real people, okay? And he's a gentleman. And maybe today those things are a little out of vogue, but they'll never go out of vogue for your community, and they certainly are very important to me. So it's a pleasure to work with him. I'm not going to pretend I know the Assemblyman well enough, but I know he was dear friends with one of our colleagues, Jim Conti, who passed away last year. So as it relates to education, I'm going to just talk about a few things in particular, and I'm sure there are going to be questions. I did hear that there were some concerns about Common Core, things like testing, student privacy. I see at least one student and someone looking that Common Core may be of interest to them. But that's one, state aid to education. Everybody comes from different areas. The area that I represent would be considered more affluent. Doesn't mean it's wealthy, but the schools that I represent have higher property values and there are higher levels of income. So correspondingly, we not only get less money than you do in terms of state aid, but we should get less money because you have issues here that are similar, but they're vastly different. The similarities are very basic. Every parent I've met wants a great education for their kids. Every parent I've met wants opportunity and access, and they want their kid to be able to have aspirations, whether it's to get a job that's a fulfilling job or to go on to college and get an advanced degree and things of that nature. So that's uniform all throughout the state. We were in Syracuse today, and Syracuse has some serious problems. Their graduation rates are nowhere near what they should be. That has an effect on you right here. That has an effect on me where I live. Because people who are not gainfully employed aren't always necessarily the best members of society, even though they may be trying. And the more we can do to educate the public in every community, the better off we all are collectively. So as it relates to state aid, I think we have proven that we can work with Governor Cuomo. We don't always agree with him. And I think where he does good things, and I'm unabashed in saying this, I always compliment him for things that he does well. If it's good for Senator Griffo's district, and it's good for my area, and it's good for the state of New York, and the governor advances it, kudos to him. If he's doing something that's adverse to your interests, we're going to tell him. And I am not shy about doing that. There were things that the governor has put out in his budgets since he became governor. Some of them were excellent. Some of them were adverse to our interests, and we fought against that and made some changes that are positive. Now, in your area, in the districts that Senator Griffo represents, I'm going to look at a number. It's called a combined wealth ratio, CWR. And I see a number of educators here who I've interacted with before. That's a very important number. Now, I think Westmoreland is 0.55, if I'm reading right? And I remember meeting people from Brasher Falls, that's 0.39. Why is that relevant? Because average wealth in this state is 1.0. If your combined wealth ratio is below 0.5 or 0.6, you have some that are down, Brasher Falls is 0.39, you are considered a relatively poor district. That has no reflection whatsoever on the people in the community. It's just a recognition that you have a different set of circumstances. Therefore, it's important that we focus on how to drive money to schools that need it the most. You would have a building aid ratio here that would be a lot higher than where I live, and it should be. You need access so you can have beautiful schools, which you do, extraordinarily well maintained, and that's all important because that's all part of a child's education and a quality education. Having said that, I'll talk about this year's budget in particular. We put in, last year, basically some people complained and said, you put in a cap. What do you mean by a cap? Well, we said in the area of health and education, we were going to tie the growth in funding for those areas to personal income. So if personal income went up considerably, that's where the money would go. Some people, that's bad, you shouldn't put a cap. Our response was, no, this is good because we are setting education apart with healthcare, but education even more so, and saying this is where the predominant source of our funding should go. If education is New York State's #1 priority, the way we can demonstrate that is by putting the money there. So we did that last year, and then came this year. What happened was state revenues were not as rosy as everyone had hoped. But the governor took what we did and, in essence, in a positive way, ignored it. He put more money in than what would have been delivered by the cap. So we started off with hundreds of millions of dollars being advanced by the governor, and ultimately what we did as legislators was say, this is good, but it's not where we need to be. It may not be good for Westmoreland. It may not be good for Brasher Falls. It may not be good for other school districts. So we need to modify it to drive money back to the local districts. And this is common sense, but it also bears repeating. The more money we can drive from the state of New York through our general sources of revenue back to your local communities, the less pressure there is on your local property tax. It's pretty simple. Not always easy to accomplish, but it's pretty simple in concept. So that's an important thing that we focus on all the time. And here's kind of what we do. And this, the state aid formula, it is hard to understand. There's no question it's hard to understand because you have so many different types of communities. Now, I use this almost every place I go. One of the blessings and the curses of New York State is its diversity. We have everything. Anything you could possibly want or conceive of or imagine, we have it all. And that's one of the reasons that I love living here. That's one of the reasons I love working in government, because of our diversity. But therein lies one of our biggest challenges. The needs of your community are similar on the basic things, but they're not the same as New York City. They're not the same as Syracuse. They're not the same as Plattsburgh. Everybody's got their own unique set of circumstances. Our challenge is to figure out how to synthesize all that and make it work. Sometimes we do it quite well, other times it's a challenge. And this year I think we did a good job. We put almost $1 billion more into education. And my expectation is next year that we will do something very similar to that. Now, on that point, if I said to you, look, we're going to add $1 billion in educational funding this year, you would say, great, it's great, it's a lot of money. And then if I turn around and said, but you're not getting any, then the $1 billion means nothing to you. So how much we spend, and equally if not more important, where we spend it, is critical. So you have very strong educational leaders who come to Albany and advocate on your behalf. And I can tell you very clearly when I don't think people are doing that, I will say that. I have met a number, I've met Howard like 35 times at this point. And he is a great advocate for your region through BOCES. So that's kind of a quick shot on the budget. Now, I'll ask this question. How many of you, just by a show of hands, how many of you know what the GEA is? Okay. Let me explain this briefly, because it is all relevant. And if you're going to do your own advocacy, this actually matters. And this is the analogy I use. If I said to you, look, I'm going to give you a 5-year contract, okay? I'm giving you a 5-year employment contract, and I'm going to give you 4% a year for each of those 5 years. Okay, 5 times 4, 20, you compound that, you probably get to like 23, 24%. Easy to understand. What happens is, or what happened, and this is not the responsibility of Governor Cuomo because he inherited this when he came into office. I come to you in the second year and say, look, I know we have this contract. I know we do. But times are tough. And I can't give you the 4%. I'll keep the contract, but I can't give you the 4%. I can only give you 2%. Then I come to the next year and I say, still a little tough, getting a little better, but I can't do the 4, I can only do 3. So when you hear the term GEA, or the gap elimination adjustment, that's the difference between what was supposed to happen and what happened in reality. There's a lot of people who malign that and criticize it. For your community, I believe very strongly, as does Senator Griffo, that every single thing we can do to help eliminate that, the better off you are. Now, there's a second thing that's equally, if not more important. Part of what's happening is, and I know this sounds a little crazy, but we have to act in concert. We have to have one unified voice, because there are schools that have had more of their quote-unquote GEA restored or reduced. And from a governmental and political level, what's going to happen is, if everyone doesn't stick together, the people who get their GEA all fixed, they're not going to care about you anymore. They're not going to care about the fact that you still have that problem. So when we're dealing with these types of things, you're going to hear this term again. We're going to be debating it. We're going to try and work with the governor. But in terms of our advocacy, I think that will be the single most important thing that we will advance. And I realize, in some respects, it's incredibly boring. But it's real money, and it makes a significant difference to local communities. Common Core, testing, and privacy. We had a hearing in Syracuse today. We had one on Long Island recently. We have one in Buffalo in 2 weeks, New York City 2 weeks thereafter, and we're going to have another one in Albany. And there, Senator Griffo spoke to this in some respects. The legislature primarily is a funding arm for education in the state of New York. In many respects, I think the last thing in the world you want is me or Joe Griffo or Assemblyman Blankenbush saying this curriculum should be taught this way in this classroom by this type of professional. We should leave that to local communities to the largest extent possible and practical. So, I will come to you in a second, sir. Having the basic educational policy in the state of New York is set by the Board of Regents and the State Education Department. And that's where Common Core has come into being. There are 45 states that have adopted it, and that is the focus of our hearings right now to frankly go out into the communities and hear what people have to say. Now, I'm only going to make this one qualitative distinction. Hearings can cut both ways. Sometimes you're not exactly sure what's going to happen or what kind of response you're going to get. So far, we've had a pretty positive response because people feel like they have an opportunity, they have a forum, and they have an avenue to address their concerns. SED is not doing hearings, the governor's not doing hearings, the regents are not doing hearings, the assembly are not doing hearings. So the fact that we're doing this is very helpful. And it is a hot button issue, there's no question about it, because not only does it tie into curriculum, but it ties into teacher evaluations and a whole host of other issues like that. So since there's at least one person who I know is itching to ask or say something, Senator Griffo,
let me just tell you what I'd like to do for a format. Let's begin the conversation now. I'd like you to come forward, please. Come to a microphone, state your name, and then ask the question that you want to ask. Again, I appreciate the Senator being here tonight. We're going to try to keep this for about 60 minutes because I want to get him, he's got to get on the road again, so being mindful of his time. So if we can keep your questions somewhat succinct, and we'll try to keep as many questions as possible, and for the next 60 minutes have this conversation on education. So if you want to come forward and get to the mic, and Mr. Bottini's already here, just identify yourself, ask the question, and then you don't even have to stay in line. You know, there'll be plenty of time, so just come on up, and that's the way we want to conduct the meeting tonight, okay? Or the forum, I should say. Click the button.
Joe Bottini. With permission to revise and extend my remarks, I will do a very outline job, otherwise it'd be a long time. A lot of folks want to speak. You're supposed to say without objection, so ordered. Good and godly day to everyone. Senator Flanagan, welcome to the beautiful Mohawk Valley once again.
Thank you.
We were together at Rome Free Academy.
I remember.
Thank you, Senator Griffo, for creating this opportunity. First of all, why should you listen to me? I don't have a question, I have a statement. I'm just a little old man with a concern. I speak for no one other than myself. 79 years, I have never been so distraught. All because of Common Core. I miss my podium, Rocco. You took the podium away from me. This is difficult. My kindergarten experience began in 1938. My final term on a local school board will end at 2015. I began my teaching career in 1968. So that's nearly a half a century of direct involvement in public education. Many education panaceas. In 35 years of teaching, all purported to fix education. Each had a modicum of worth and a maximum of used oats. I took the scraps of good stuff, discarded the tons of used oats, and went on teaching. Some recently have manufactured a pseudo-crisis in public education. The worst example of educationally unsound, scientifically unattainable, and socially damaging change is NCLB morphed into RTT with Common Core at its center. All attempts to destroy public education as we knew it. Neither you nor I, nor anyone in this room, is in a position to fix the problem. Big corporations with an eye on bottom line will not be easily convinced to think of the children. Federal politicians with an eye on re-election campaign coffers will not have the chutzpah to broach the subject. It is a mess of huge proportions. Children are being abused. By the pressure and stress of living up to arbitrary and capricious standards, there is a sickness in public education, not the making of the educators. The causal agent, mistakes of government, and corporate greed. Society crumbles, a lack of moral compass, so the schools reflect this trend. I have a list of 21 sites where one might read about the apprehensions with this newest pile of slime that has slithered down the political pipe. My research has taken me to many such sites, first-hand accounts of teachers, coupled with talks with parents and students. I am convinced the direction of public education is heading down a dangerous path. I downloaded a copy of a teacher's presentation given at Hartwood College, damning evidence of the abuse being delivered to school children each and every day in New York State. 2 new publications just out this week: Mismeasure of Education by Horn and Wilburn, Reign of Error by Diane Ravitch, outline the child abuse of Common Core. Tennessee, voluntarily laboratory for experiments and manipulations of public schools. Tennessee, it was willing to invite private interest to help it shape state educational policy, serve the interests of profiteers, opportunists, politicians, charlatans, and others eager to gain access to the public money devoted to education. The outcome was supposed to end the so-called learning gap. They have failed to address the poverty gap, social and economic injustices, other factors outside the sway and control of schools, administrators, and teachers. Tennessee, the state is now paying for 85% of the state's kindergarten children to be administered the Stat 3 before most of them could read and count. Children are being abused. This abuse ought to be reported to the child abuse authorities. National government holds children hostage, offering money if the states would comply. It is criminal. Those states repeat the crime, doing the same hostage holding with local districts. A system of justice forces me to recoil and fight the feeling of one who is about to vomit. If states want a piece of the ill-gotten pie, they must comply. If local districts want some crumbs from that ill-gotten piece of pie, they must comply. Local school districts fighting insolvency are forced to buckle and comply. Children are the last consideration in this hideous scheme of the suppliers of school materials who are making mega bucks. It has now become a billion-dollar industry. Is there no decency left in our morally crumbling society? No government representatives with a moral fiber enough to stand up for children? Make no mistake about it, children are being abused. Time being of essence, I will defer any further discourse, offering to meet with you, Senator Flanagan, in Albany, to further delineate solid, specific instances of fraud, abuse, and criminal acts fostered upon the children of our state. This is very difficult skipping over so much, so if it's fragmented, that's the reason for it. you may be amenable to giving this little old man a chance to fix the conceived problem. And I won't charge you anything. I may even take you to lunch. And it'll be more than pizza, I could assure you that. Thank you for attending, and thank you for listening.
My name is Seth Napoli, and I have 2 kids in the Holland-Patton School District, and I have never been involved in public education. And how do you turn it over? Well, anyway, my
Move it up, closer to you.
stay on. My wow, that's loud. My 3rd grade child came home with homework, and she did the whole page of homework with the new core curriculum that one of you guys must have read and come up with. That is the hardest way that I can ever think of doing multiplication facts, the way that you guys have it written out. She went through the whole thing all the way down to the end. And when we got to the end, I took the paper away from her and asked her what 7 times 3 was. She told me 20. She couldn't even get 21 after she had done the whole page correctly. When I was a kid, we memorized our multiplication facts, and it wasn't that big a deal. But apparently, we have to do it the hard way now. I'm not sure if you guys have read it or not, but drawing an array and trying to get 7 times 3 by multiplying 3 times 5 and 2 times 6 and adding it together. I mean, that's kind of like going around your head to get to your butt. I mean, that's like the hardest way that you could ever do it. And you guys, I'm just a concerned parent. I've never done anything with this public education, but this is the worst thing that I can think of. And doing her homework, they had to send me instructions. So anyway, I'll pass the microphone to the next person. Or would you like it back? Senator.
I want to try and be as succinct as possible just to give people an opportunity to speak. And I'm giving you what I believe is an informed opinion. I'm not suggesting that you have to agree with everything I say at all. The policy that you're talking about, the legislature does not set that policy. Now, there are those who say that whatever we have done for X number of years or decades, that maybe it's time for a change. And that debate is going on right now. However, the State Education Department, at the direction of the Board of Regents, adopted Common Core standards. And there's a fundamental difference between Common Core standards and Common Core curriculum. By and large, almost without exception, the state of New York does not mandate curriculum. Curriculum is developed at the local level. Just let me finish, please. Okay, but let me just finish. Excuse me?
It's all about money. They're getting money from you guys to run the school, and they don't get the money if they don't do the curriculum. So it doesn't work.
Okay.
There is a Board of Regents. All right, listen. This is a conversation. We're going to ask you all to come and play. Ask a question. Let them answer. We can have a follow-up. Okay, let's not try to interrupt each other and everything. Let's try to have this conversation. Okay?
Seth, I would make this distinction. When you talk in a general capacity about the state of New York, you're right, it is the state. But there's a delineation in terms of who is responsible for what. Now, we, as part of our hearings, we have had discussions about the adoption of curriculum. And they're talking about things like modules and sending stuff to school districts to allow them to take a look. They're not saying you have to take this module and do it this way or that way. The term I heard today was adopt, adapt, or ignore. You don't necessarily have to take what the state gives you and implement it. There is real consternation and real frustration and real issues. I am not disagreeing with you for 1 second in that regard. Ultimately, curriculum is developed at the local level. It can be in conjunction with the state education department, but school districts, with some guidance, will ultimately adopt a local curriculum. And it's a fluid process right now. But I'm trying to be as fair as possible. We do oversee the state ed department. The Board of Regents are elected. And we, as I said before, overwhelmingly, our major charge is to come up with the funding of education. But go ahead, please.
I prepared some comments which I will not read.
Okay.
And I'll give you one assembly that doesn't have the assembly. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head. I have 3 questions, and I'd like to make a couple comments before you answer. And my question is, will you, Senator Flanagan, support legislation for the transparency in the cost of the state testing requirements, which is the Truth in Testing Act Bill, Senate 4712? And will you support legislation to stop the unnecessary testing of grades K through 2, except for diagnostic purposes, which is Senate Bill, Stop Unnecessary K through 2 Testing Bill, Senate 4764? And will you advocate to the Board of Regents and Commissioner King that they delay the implementation of Common Core testing for graduation requirements? And the reason I ask you to support these is in talking to my superintendent this morning, the school district has overspent their printing bill on printing the modules, and many superintendents are adopting the modules, which still have not all been forwarded to the schools, are adopting them because of their fear of not doing well on the tests, and they think the tests are going to be based on them. Number 2, the 9th grade English teacher told me today that she had to order $2,900 in teaching materials for Module 1, literature books, in order to implement that. She has 3 more modules to go. There are other subject areas, other grades that will have teaching modules. Teachers are being asked to implement a textbook curriculum and the module curriculum, and one school district I know of, they're asking to teach 3. All of it because they're trying to buy from the publisher of the test in order to do well on testing, and as I said before, the state or what the teachers are accustomed to using. The over-testing has to stop because money is being spent on the testing, not on providing the resources for the Common Core standards. I know of very few teachers that do not support the Common Core standards. What they are having a problem with is the over-testing that's going with it and the rollout that was not done by the State Education Department in supplying teacher training, which resources need to go to that, and in not supplying teaching materials that the teachers had time to implement. It takes, from my experience of 40 years of teaching, it takes 3 years in order to roll out a curriculum. And that's what's necessary before these tests are used for graduation requirements. Thank you.
You covered a lot of ground. And quite well, I might add. The legislation that you're referring to, I think I'm fairly confident I know which ones you're referring to. I'm very careful about misspeaking without having the bill in front of me and going through it in detail. However, okay. I would make several basic points, and I'm going to go back and seemingly off topic, but I believe it's on topic. One of the things that we advocated with APPR, the Senate majority advocated, and I personally spoke to the governor about this, and frankly it fell on deaf ears, was a slowdown of the implementation of APPR. That it should have been done in a more seamless capacity, and that it should have had a type of hold harmless provision for at least the first year. And now we have living proof of why that would have been a prudent course to take. That didn't happen. Fast forward a little bit to where we are now in terms of ELA 3 through 8, the release of the scores, and now the individual scores coming out, and now the prospect of the regions incorporating Common Core as we come into this school year. I have a grave concern, and have raised this now at the hearings, about whether or not we should have Common Core reflected in the regions for this year. Because, and all of you, some of you, Seth, you, I don't know how old your children are, but you said you have a third grader. So when you have 3 through 8, that's challenging enough. But when you put a regions out, and kids may go from 85 to 70, or 90 to 72, that not only freaks them out, but it correspondingly does the same to their parents. So in my estimation, I don't see why we need to do that right now. There is a disagreement, and I know Senator Griffo will be having other people here who can talk to these types of issues, but there's a mentality that says you can't wait and that it has to be done together. The educators that I talk to, the educators that I listen to, make it very clear that you don't have to do the two together. You can work with the curriculum and then change the assessments. You don't have to do it at the same time. And particularly, that's problematic in the first year. So I am comfortable that I have represented both publicly, and I'm doing it again right now. In my estimation, the regions in particular, that should be slowed down and modified. Now, part of the response will come, and you are a teacher, so you know this. The opportunity is there so that this year, you can take the regions with the Common Core, or you can take the old test, which means you're now taking 2 tests instead of 1. You're not mandated to do it, but you have that option. So you're taking 2 tests, and you can take the higher score. I don't think we should be doing that. And that's a function of, frankly, some of the stuff that we're doing right now, and this is one of the reasons we are having the hearings. Now, as it relates to testing, and then we can probably talk afterwards because I don't want to take too much time. On testing in particular, and I have asked this question, we asked it at the first hearing, I asked it again today. There is a major disconnect, in my opinion, about how many tests are required. Now, I see you have a lady here with a NICET shirt on, okay? NICET has probably been the most effective in responding to the question I've asked is how many tests does a kid actually have to take from kindergarten through 12th grade? If you don't change anything right now, how many tests does a kid have to take? And how many are from the federal government, how many are from the state, and how many are by the local district? I am not aware of any mandate from the state of New York or any regulation from the state of New York that says a child has to be tested in pre-K or kindergarten. I recognize that districts are moving in that direction because they feel some pressure, but I'm not aware of anything that says it has to be done. You know, the ELA tests, that's a creature of the federal government. That's not a function of New York State. We're obligated to abide by federal law. So those tests are mandated by the federal government. And I promise you, I will forward to Senator Griffo whatever we get. I asked at the first hearing that we had, everybody who spoke, I asked everyone to come back to me by today on what they believe to be the tests. And the only 2 people that were responded were the state education department and a parent who did not testify. I got an email from a parent who's not in my district who gave me what she believed to be all the tests. So as we debate this subject and discuss it, one of the primary challenges is actually figuring out what all the tests are. Are there pre-tests, are there post-tests, are there diagnostic testing? When do they start, when do they end? What's done at the local level? And that is unresolved because I have not gotten any of that information. And as I said, the group that has been the most straightforward on it, not in terms of giving complete information, has been the teachers.
I'd like to follow up on, I didn't prepare comments on funding. I'll give just a short lesson. Jedediah Peck is known as the father of the common schools. He's from Otsego County. He was born in the 1700s. And as an assemblyman, he began in 1801 to push for the public funded common schools in the state of New York. In 1812, the legislation finally passed. And when that passed, it was understood that the state was going to provide 50% of the funding of these common schools. I urge you to get back to that 50%, and it may be needed in the 21st century to be more than 50% because of the court decision on CFE. We need to get back to that. Our children are entitled to a future.
Thank you.
Hello, and thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
My name is Beth Edwards, and I'm both a mom and a teacher. And first of all, I want to commend all of the teachers from the Westmoreland School District and probably every other school district in here. My daughter was a third grader last year, and her teacher said it doesn't matter how you do, it matters that you tried your best. And I think every teacher worth their salt told their kids that, and I'm grateful to them. I also want you to know that I am very worried about our kids too. My children do well because they're in this district, because my husband and I are both from middle income families. I'm college educated. We put education first, and my kids are in this school district because I could afford to live here. The kids I teach, most of them come from poor schools, poor district, poor whatever you want to call it. They don't have the same opportunities, and they're taking the same tests. I'm not saying they can't learn, because I know they can. I'm saying they can't learn at the same rate. I'm saying they're starting behind. I'm saying I'm going to catch them up. But they're not going to be able to take the same test and do the same job that my daughter in third grade did when they're in third grade, because they're starting so far behind. I know there are programs, but I also know that maybe we need to fix something else. The other thing I don't understand is why, in this great state of diversity, people are being singled out if they teach ELL or if they teach students with disabilities. Last year, my math teacher on my team had 29 kids with IEPs. The first 8 of them assisted her in her APPR. The other 21 didn't. My daughter graduated from Westmoreland. She was valedictorian. She had a physical disability, so she got accommodations. There are kids who are documented with learning disabilities who, yes, okay, let's test and see if they can read the passage, but can't we at least read the questions to them so they have a fighting chance to show us what they know? Finally, I do have to say that we aren't putting our children first. Commissioner King very nicely said that the abysmal state test scores last year aren't going to hurt me as a teacher. They're not going to hurt districts. They're not going to hurt administrators. But they're going on my kid's permanent record, and that's a crime.
My name is Brittany Wilson. I come from Camden School District, and I'm the parent of 2 children within the school district. And I, too, have never been so discouraged and disgusted in this state, in the federal government. And I understand you stand in front of us in your exact words where there's unique circumstances all around us, yet we are applying and implementing a program that is a one-size-fits-all for programs in schools that have unique differences. And I understand that you yourself may not have wrote this and that you yourself may not have passed this, but what are you yourself doing to fight for our children and stop this? Because it needs to stop. It is not okay that my children are experiments in this, because the reality is, you say Common Core, it's preparing my child for college and workforce ready. How do you know that? Where in United States have we used this, and have we applied this before, that you can back that up and say that my first grader is going to be college ready because of Common Core? Because the only thing I think that it is going to teach my first grader in my pre-K is that they're nothing more than a number. And I will roll over and fight till my dying day to teach my children and the teachers, because Camden is equipped with stellar, unique, magnificent teachers that bleed every day for these children, that they are more than a number. because they are, and they deserve, just as you and I received an education, an opportunity to be unique and diverse and have their needs met. And I've met with the school superintendent, and I've met with the principal, and I'm not sure where the lack of communication is going, but Camden has adopted these modules 100%. And although the principal has told me that he has implemented, not for and indefinitely, how long until the state and federal government controls what they can and cannot teach, that they too have to follow these modules to a T, or else our children will not be equipped and ready to take these tests. So I'm confused as a parent and concerned why our district is telling us this, but yet you stand here and say they don't have to, they can opt out. Because it was my understanding if they ignore it, then we get no funding. And Camden is 60% reliable on funding. So how is that beneficial to the children?
Okay, you mentioned a number of different things, and I probably should have said this right in the beginning. My kids are a little older at this point, 25, 23, and 19. Ashley, Sean, and Jake, they are products of the public schools in my area. So I completely believe in public education. And I am a parent, and I'm telling you from the bottom of my heart, the way I look at these things is through the view of my own kids. What do I want, what did I want, and what would I want for my own kids? So, it sounds selfish in a way, but I think it's a fair way to look at it. A couple of, to your points. You are correct. It is too early to tell what the, well, even to some extent the short term, but the long-term effects are of Common Core standards. Common Core standards were essentially put together by the National Governors Association and the chief educational officers of all the states across the country. Not everyone has adopted it, but most states have adopted it. And there are far more states that have adopted Common Core standards than have received Race to the Top funding. So there are a number of states who, independent of Race to the Top, have adopted Common Core. I'm not a teacher, I'm not a professional educator. I work with my colleagues in government, and I will never stand before you or anyone else and say, somehow I know it better than everybody else, because that's just not the truth. Beyond that, I do think that, I believe I am correct. The state of New York has tried to provide some guidance by doing a number of different things, by having some training sessions. Not every place. They've had plenty of people who have come to Albany. I heard the superintendent of Syracuse testify today what they've done in their district locally by decision with their school board and how they wanted to approach some of these issues, including the implementation of Common Core curriculum. And I'll go back to the phrase that he used before. Adopt,
adapt, and ignore.
Or ignore, okay. I want to be clear. I didn't say, I don't believe I used the phrase opt out. I believe that school districts can look at the guidance that's offered by the state of New York, but they are not obligated to follow it. Now, they may come back and respond that they feel the pressure to do it because these are the things that are out there, and this seems to be the closest, or bears the closest relation to what everyone thinks the tests are going to be. I don't think I can dispute that. You asked what I am doing and what we are doing as legislators. I'm here, okay, and we are having.
And thank you.
No, listen, I appreciate that, and I'm not. It's not one of these, attaboys to myself. My point is that we are out and we are listening. I met Joe last year. I remember how passionate he was then. I feel like I've met you before at some other event, but you're a teacher for 40 years. I should listen to what she has to say. So this is a fluid process. It did not occur overnight, and it's not going to change overnight. But I believe that we will have a number of not only comments, but recommendations to the governor and to the regions. Because the governor will come back and say, just as I told you, that he doesn't really set educational policy. I can be, hopefully, an ardent advocate, an articulate spokesperson, but if the governor of the state of New York jumps into the fray on this, I have a feeling that's going to generate a lot more attention. Not trying to pass the buck to him, we need to work together. We will have 5 hearings, And at the end of those hearings, everything will be put together as a matter of public record. You'll have access to it. You can frankly go and look at what we have right now. You want to submit written comments? God love you, please do it, and your colleagues. So if we, this sounds corny, but I'm saying it anyway. If we didn't care, we wouldn't be here. Okay? I'm not saying for 1 New York minute that we're perfect. Well, Griffo's perfect. I'm working on it. But, you know, you're a mom, okay? And I have an inherent respect for that. This is gonna add to this. I heard some of the comments. To me, in education, you can be in a beautiful building, you can have a great school board, but if you don't have top-notch teachers in front of that classroom, there is absolutely nothing in the world that is better or more important than having a good teacher in front of the classroom.
And I guess maybe that's where my concern is, because I have top-notch teachers, and I have my son's teachers saying, I wouldn't teach this. This isn't the way I would teach this. This isn't what I would teach. I wouldn't teach this. So why are we taking that away from them? Why are we implementing these standards that they wouldn't teach? And to what? Compare them with worldly other students? If I wanted my child compared to a Chinese student, I would live in China. I want my child to live and be able to embrace the American dream that I was able to, that you were, that we were. And I feel this constitutionally and fundamentally takes away my child's rights.
Okay.
I'm Shelby Davis. I grew up here locally, and I've got 2 children in elementary school at Clinton. Responding to the comment about how much testing our children are being subjected to, my first grader has had the APPR testing for every single subject. And I think a big portion of that is, while it's not legislated that they have to do that, it's tied to the evaluations for the teachers and the principals. If they don't have the pre-test and the post-test and use those numbers to show some sort of growth for their students, they're not going to get their raises, they're not going to get their funding. And that is a big issue, and it's not legislated that they have to do that, but it's an economic incentive for them to do that, and that's almost as bad, or possibly even worse. And since you came here and you said you're really responsible for the funding, I'm also wanting to hear your comments about the campaign for fiscal equity and how they sued and won the lawsuit years ago, but there still is a severe funding gap for the schools that are not as rich to get the funding they require to have equitable education with the schools that are rich.
2 separate subjects there. Excuse me, and I'm going to disagree with part of what you were suggesting, respectfully, of course. On APPR, you have no question that 20% of an evaluation is based on New York State tests. There's another 20% that can be adapted with some combination of local effort or local assessment, or you can rely on the state tests in a different way to get to a number of roughly 40%. But as it relates to state tests, that is 20% of a teacher's evaluation. The issue about the funding, at this point, is a non-issue. It was an issue with the City of New York and some other districts that did not come up to par or come up to snuff on their APPR plans. We fixed that in the budget. So there's no direct correlation now in terms of APPR plans and loss of financial aid to districts. And frankly, the reason we fixed it was because people like Joe say, wait a second, if we're going to fix this thing for the City of New York, why the heck aren't we doing it for everybody else? So I agree with you in a general sense, but on the specifics, I think there are some important distinctions. As it relates to CFE, I could stand here and say, CFE demanded another $7 billion, and that's where the money should be. And then I can tell you the economic realities that the state has faced. Governor Cuomo, when he came into office, inherited a $10 billion deficit. Okay? And as I said before, He didn't create that problem. And we as a legislative body and bodies and the executive made some fundamental philosophical changes to how business was being done in the state of New York. The governor helped control spending, because for far too long the state of New York was a classic example of don't do as I do, but rather do as I say. So now the governor has come in with each of his budgets under 2%. And I guarantee you now that there's a change coming next year, his budget will come in at whatever the cap is, even though we don't have a cap at the state level. Last year, we put about $750 million of new money into education. This year, we put about $1 billion of new money into education. And I will grant you that in 09 and 010, there were reductions. I'm not going to dance around it. But I do know that we are moving in the right direction. And as I said before, we took what the governor did and we actually added more money. So I respect what you're saying about CFE and foundation aid, but as I've often said, districts and parents, more importantly, they don't necessarily care what we call it. If the money is coming and it's coming in the right way and it helps your local community, you can call it CFE, you can call it ABC. If it gets to you and it makes a difference locally, that's the most important thing. But I do think that we have rectified some of the problems of the past, and there will be plenty of people who will say we're back at levels that we were in 08 and 09, but I can tell you and repeat, in the last 2 years we've added $1.75 billion in new money. I know what you're going to say.
Yes, you do, because you met me outside. That's why you know what I'm going to say. My name is Pat Riedel. I'm from the Rome School District. I'm not representing the Rome School District tonight. I am on the Board of Education. Like the gentleman ahead of me, I had 30 years of experience as a secretary in the Rome District, in elementary, high school, and the superintendent's office. Not this superintendent, previous superintendents. And then I became a member of the Board of Education. But I'm here tonight because I bet every one of you in this room can write your name. But I'm telling you that if you have children in the elementary schools right now, I don't think every one of them know how to write their name, nor are they being taught. So I wrote down... Step forward on that, because we can't hear you. I'm sorry. So I wrote down what I wanted to say to you. And the title came from an article that I found in the National Education Association document dated July 22nd. Common Core does not include cursive. That's, as you said, what did you call it? Penmanship. In North Carolina, the Senate passed a bill to make cursive a requirement in the public schools. This bill is now called Back to Basics legislation, and it also requires North Carolina students to memorize the multiplication tables. Cursive teaches fine motor skills. It is faster and more efficient than printed handwriting. And if you can't write it, you certainly can't read it. And yet if you can't read it, you won't be able to read any of our historical documents. Across the country, this is being debated in publications such as the New York Times and the Journal of American Medicine. One person that I saw made a comment, said they believe it should be taught to be read, but not written. Now that's ridiculous. I'm not convinced that all that Common Core is about is essential to a good education. The people that have created Common Core, I believe, learned the basics, just like every one of us. They learned reading, writing, and arithmetic. I also truly believe that if we take the pressure off our educators and just let the teachers teach without having to worry that Big Brother is watching over their shoulders, our students will once again be at the forefront of education throughout the world. Teachers have always had observations done in their classrooms by their principals. I know that for a fact because I typed dozens of them. And principals have had observations of them done by their superintendents, and I know that because I typed those also. I don't think we are moving forward. I think we are wasting time and ultimately hurting our most important citizens, our students. Please, gentlemen, please encourage the powers to be to let the teachers teach, especially the basics. Take the pressure off and see how much better they will do. And most of all, do not give up on what has worked so well in the past. Cursive writing, and as the gentleman said, the multiplication tables. A little common sense will go a much longer way in educating our most valuable assets. Don't wait 2 or 3 or more years to see that we are really hurting everyone. Please do something about it now.
Should I go over and look at the pad? Did you print that or did you write it in cursive? 2 very quick things. I recall, and I do the whole concept of back to basics. Pat and I had spoken outside. To me, that's lunacy. I really think people need to learn to write exactly the way you're talking about. I remember coming home with a penmanship book. Like, you had to practice to stay inside the lines, and so I certainly remember that. And frankly, I remember in 3rd grade, I had a teacher named Miss Mahoney, who was a great teacher. And this is going to sound dumb in a way, but I was pretty good at multiplication. So what they would do is, you would start in the front of the room, and it would be 2 students. She would flip a card, and whoever got the right answer first would keep going. That's one of the ways that I learned with the flashcards, and it still sticks in my mind today. So, yeah, there's nothing wrong with going back to basics, but I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. My name is Erica Knutson, and I'm here tonight as a parent of 2 children at the Camden Elementary School, and I'm also a teacher at Camden Elementary. I'm not representing Camden tonight. I'd like to start with a story about when I was a child. I've always known, since probably kindergarten myself, that all I wanted to do was to grow up and be a teacher. But I struggled in school. I went to math help, I went to reading help. I did not graduate with a Regents diploma. I graduated with a local diploma. My guidance counselor told my parents I would never get into a 4-year school. I had everybody against me in education as far as guidance counselors and the education department. I went to Mohawk Valley. I did the best that I could. I did not have a wonderful GPA, but I went on to Oneonta, graduated with high honors. I went and I got my master's degree, and today I'm an early intervention teacher. And why I am so passionate about my job is that I was able to teach these struggling kids in a way that was never taught to me, in a creative manner where these kids had fun and they got it. And for the last 4 years, my job has been to help close the gap. My kids that come in have had no pre-K, they've had no nursery school, some have had Head Start, they have very low vocabulary scores. A lot of these kids, you wonder if their parents even communicate with them. I also have a daughter that has a learning disability. And this year she's in 3rd grade. My other daughter is in 1st grade, and she will probably be diagnosed with ADHD. I have been witnessing the assessments giving to these kindergarten kids. And I have my list of children, my early intervention children, who I am supposed to be pulling so that I can teach them the letters that they don't know, that everybody else in the class already knows. And it's not a huge amount of kids, but I have 22 out of the 66 kids that are in kindergarten. These kids are the ones that sit there during these assessments, these 3 to 4 page listening and learning assessments, who cannot write their name at the top of their paper, who do not know what a number 1 is, who does not know how to track from left to right or left and right, even after all of these 90-minute lessons that they've sat through. They're lost. They are lost. They are stressed. The teachers are stressed. The parents are stressed. I am stressed for my child. The bad behavior is increased. The high kids are getting it, but we are not teaching to medium and low kids. This is a disservice, and it's a crime and it's abuse. And I, as a parent and as a teacher, I am extremely and utterly frustrated. And my creativity has been stifled. I can't teach the way I've always wanted to teach. And I'm not sure I will retire in this profession if I have to teach like this for the rest of my career.
sorry, could you come back up for a second? I feel like they're getting, come on down! Anyway, a couple of things, and I do have one or two questions for you, please. It's a great story, first of all, so congratulations.
There was more to it, but I forgot.
No, but what you said was heartfelt, and that certainly counts. Do the kids that you are teaching, do they all have IEPs?
No.
It's early intervention.
This is based on the kindergarten Dial 3 entrance. Yeah.
Okay, so the kids who are taking the test that you're referring to, the assessment, they don't have a different allotment of time or anything like that?
No, everybody comes in over the summer. There's the speech teacher, the PE teacher, the school nurse, the kindergarten teacher. They go from teacher to teacher, and every child is given the same test. Then it's scored. Anybody that scores 40th percentile or below automatically goes on my roster. Then we come in and we look at Peabody B scores, which is a language. It's a receptive language assessment. Anybody that scores a standard score of 100 or below also gets placed on my list. My first year I had 31 out of 60 kids on my list. My second year I had 27. My third year I had 24. And this year I have 21 children. That is 1/3 of the kindergarten need my help. They cannot write their names, and they're way below everybody else. These kids are crying. They're having accidents. They're throwing up. They're physically stressed out. My children too. It is so painful to see my child who cannot sit that long, cannot sit to do homework, and me get aggravated with them because they just physically are incapable of for sitting that long and understanding it. They don't get it. I put gum out on the table. I say to my daughter, Cleo, here's 7 pieces of gum. Mommy gives you 7 pieces of gum. Your sister Ella gives you nothing. How many do you have left? 7. She gets it. She does not get it the way it's being taught.
Okay, just one other comment. The Education Reform Commission, one of the uniform things we've heard in every community across the state, from parents, educators, educational experts, the achievement gap, it's obviously real. There's a direct correlation with poverty as much or more than anything else. And statistically, and this was very educational for me, if kids are not on proper reading level by 3rd grade, their chances for success are exponentially diminished. Mm-hmm. So there is, and it is a slow moving boat, but there is a lot more focus, and I believe Commissioner King has been as outspoken as anybody about early childhood education. Head Start's great, it's not the same thing, you know that. So there is some fruitful discussion on that. I'm not sure where it's going to go, I just wanted to pass that along, but again, I appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Good evening, Senator Flanagan. I'm Jeff Simons. I'm the superintendent of the Rome City School District. At the beginning of your remarks, you talked about combined wealth ratio. Just for purposes of information, the Rome City School District's combined wealth ratio is about 0.46, so we are one of the poorest school districts in New York State. And so I'm thankful again that you've come here. You've come to Rome Free Academy in the past. I just want to talk a little bit about some of the contradictions that are coming from the State Education Department, from what the State Education Department purports to be the situation regarding some of the reforms as opposed to what's actually happening on the ground. And one of the things we've heard tonight is that SED has indicated that the school districts have the option to either use the Common Core modules or to ignore them or to adapt them. And the dilemma of that is the state didn't really put together a very good implementation plan for any of this. And so there's a condensed crunch period of time in which our teachers are put into a situation that we have to purchase the modules and make them available. The second piece that makes this even more difficult is that some of the modules are not even published for a complete year's worth of instruction. And I have to tell you that our teachers in Rome and across the districts in this area are working extremely hard, putting in many hours of time and investing their own personal time and resources in implementing the Common Core because they didn't have the benefit of a staged implementation. 3 years ago, the Commissioner of Education said that the expectation across New York State is to teach 2 units, and so teachers across the state taught 2 units. Last year, he said we're going to make modules available for teachers to be able to utilize in preparation for the new assessments. We changed the test last year, and only 30% of the kids were reported having met proficiency across the state. Now I've got integrated algebra teachers, some of whom are here in this room tonight, putting in their time after school on Saturdays, meeting as a department, struggling is how do we get kids ready for an integrated algebra regents exam that occurs this year when the state has only provided us with 3 or 4 of the units for us to be able to adapt and do our work. They're working very hard on it, but don't be misled by the perceptions that state education department might put out that the teacher, because the teachers are embracing this and teachers are working hard on it, that it's going smoothly. You're changing an assessment, a high-stakes regents exam, and the state has not provided the resources for our curriculum to be adapted to what the state is going to be testing in June. So I support what you said about slowing it down. I've talked about the fact that I am not an opponent of Common Core. In fact, I am a supporter of many of the standards that the state is trying to implement. But the implementation of this, going from a year in which you say the expectation is you only have to teach 2 units, to making a resource available that's incomplete, to now saying that we're going to have a high-stakes regents exam dependent on it is simply not the way to do business in New York State. The other issue I want to talk about is you talked about pre-K. I have a program in Rome of 296 students participating in a half-day pre-K program. Right? And again, we are a high-needs district. The governor's pathway to getting more kids involved in full-day pre-K is to provide a competitive grant. The competitive grants do not work for upstate New York. They do not work for high-needs districts. If universal funding of pre-K is important for every child in New York State, then universally fund it. So there are problems with the staging of the implementation of Common Core that are creating these inherent pressures on teachers and parents. It's not the Common Core in and of itself, in my viewpoint. There are problems with the resources being available for teachers to be able to adapt their curriculum to meet students' needs, and there are problems with the timelines related to the test. It isn't that Common Core is all bad. It isn't that there isn't a lot of good things in Common Core. It's that the superintendents and the school boards and the teachers and the administrators who are charged with implementing SED reforms have not been given the appropriate staging to be able to do this well for the kids. Appreciate you listening.
Yep. Just to follow up on what you said, if I gave anyone the wrong impression, I'm going to correct it right now. I absolutely concur that the rollout and the implementation of everything that's going on is far below and far beneath what it should be. I think there's a disconnect. I don't think that while I have great respect for these individuals in their individual capacity, as an entity, I don't believe the state education department is listening and acting, which includes modifying some of the things we're talking about. I would agree with you, and I realize there are some people who do not like Common Core at all. But by and large, nationally, the AFT here in the state of New York, NYSED is supportive of Common Core as long as it's done the right way. One of the administrators today, Jim Viola, he heads the, basically the principals union for the state. He was referring to the fact that information was provided as late as August of 2012 for September of 2012. And it's just, you should, I don't know if this is comforting or not, but there is a uniformity in frustration and opinion as it relates to the timing and the implementation. So remember I talked about before, we said unique characteristics. In this case, everybody's the same because everybody shares the same frustration. Now you, sir, have been patient, but I'm going to let this student go.
Defer to the other side.
First, I'm going to just, we have to just be a little mindful of the senator. I've got to get him on the road, so we're going to try to take the rest of these questions. You could just try to keep it flowing here so we can do that, all right? And then I want to get as many people as possible involved. And he'll be here for a couple of minutes after, but I want to get him on the road because he's got a long ride tonight. So we'll start with the student and then...
Hi, my name's Megan. I'm a senior at Erskine. And I just have a really quick question for you. After everything you've heard here tonight and every other place that you've been throughout the state, what do you think is going to get changed as far as the core curriculum goes?
Of course. All right, so you're a senior. Congratulations on that, for starters. I would say this, couple of things, and I want to be as clear as possible. I told you I've worked very closely with Senator Griffo, but we don't act unilaterally. And we have put together a series of hearings, and some people would say, why aren't you having a hearing every other day as opposed to doing it every other week? A lot of it has to do with timing, getting people together, and giving people an appropriate forum to do things like this. It is my expectation that we will make very strong recommendations, and I think that there will possibly be legislation introduced to address some of the concerns that are being raised and that will be raised. And I think we will probably individually and collectively send letters to the governor, to the regents, to the commissioner, and the state education department outlining things that we've heard, suggesting things that we think need to be changed. And you know, the assembly will be involved for sure. So I believe that there will be recommendations, but I think if I were to kind of consolidate it in one respect, I would say it would be more along the lines of what some of the folks have been saying, that slow it down, give it a chance to be properly implemented, and then assess once that's done. So let's put it this way. I hope you have a great senior year. Whatever you're planning, I hope it works out for you. Okay? And I'm also hopeful that after you leave school that you'll be able to look back and see that we have made some changes. For the good, I hope.
Thanks for coming. It's good to see you here. We have some catching up to do. I'm going to read some scripted remarks, and I'll try to read really quickly. What we're going through now with regard to this initiative is unprecedented. Never in our state's history has there been such a negative reaction to a Regents education initiative. So there must be something to this reaction. By the way, my name is Steve Schrey. I'm an educator. I've also been on a school board, and I've also been a Teachers Association president. I've seen it from every angle. I've also received a handwriting award in elementary school, just like you, Senator. I'm sure that part of the reason you're here is because you simply could not ignore this reaction any longer. You had to try and get from the public what they felt. And I just want to say that the educators in this state have been demonized by the governor, by the commissioner, and I don't think it's fair. The educators in this state have always been accountable. And that accountability thing is thrown around like we haven't had any regard for it. We've always been accountable, always been responsible for getting behind every new education initiative promoted by SED. The educators in this state have worked for years to establish and maintain a trust and a working and meaningful relationship with the students and parents in their school districts. We should not have to stand in front of them and apologize at open house for this travesty. There's no education crisis in our public schools, or at least there wasn't until the passing of Education Law 3012C. If you really want to fix schools, you'll really commit to fixing poverty. We can all predict which schools will be the best performers and which ones consistently fall behind. Just think in your head of the most affluent towns in your districts, and then think of the poorest. You can guess where I'm going with this. If there's an education crisis in this state, it has a lot more to do with the community's aggregate wealth than an aggregate of its current test scores. The Common Core, the accompanying APPR, and standardized tests have combined to become the most mismanaged initiative that any Commissioner of Education in the great history of public education in this state has ever promoted, including, but not limited to, the following deficiencies: inadequate training of all stakeholders, inadequate funding for the entire initiative, poor distribution of necessary materials to implement the Common Core, inadequate preparation of the electronic and digital systems to properly administer, score, and review students' work and test aligns with the Common Core, inappropriate misaligned content with regard to the targeted age groups that are being taught, inconsistent and inadequate support by SED for school districts throughout the development of local systems and during the implementation process. Failure of Common Core to address the needs of students with learning disabilities. Failure of the Common Core to address the needs of students with English as a second language. Failure of the Common Core to offer curriculum programming for the arts. And failure of the Common Core to offer curriculum programming for trade skills. My testimony illustrates only a fraction of the grave deficiencies in the Common Core state standards, and as they have been implemented by the State Education Department, the citizens of this state are not deserving of this kind of incompetence. Unfortunately, we cannot retrieve the lost time or the lost instruction. However, we can and should reclaim the system structure that existed prior to Common Core. The phrase college and career ready is catchy, very catchy. But the Common Core state standards will actually leave our students less prepared for college coursework due to its narrow focus, and less prepared for for careers which do not require a college degree. Before and after the implementation of the Common Core, New York State was and is sending record numbers of students to colleges. So why the need for college ready if they already are? Why would these colleges accept kids who aren't ready for college? I think there's some sort of disconnect there. And I'm still waiting for the long list of jobs which are going to be promised to future graduates in terms of the college and career ready. The Common Core state standards are very limited, narrowly focused set of program modules. The modules dictate what is to be taught and require the use of a script to teach them. The kind of restricted teaching method, or this kind of restricted teaching method, will inevitably result in restricted range of learning. The public education system in the United States must properly fitted and funded to maintain the greatest public education system in the free world. Restrictive curricula and standards, such as the ones promoted by the creators of the Common Core, do not reflect a society committed to preserving all options for its children. They actually represent the end of a promise that America has always kept for its children, that we will strive to educate every child in every way, that we will dedicate ourselves to educating the whole child. Please go back to the Senate and the Assembly, restore the system to its original vision and mission. Repeal Ed Law 3012C. Stop spending taxpayer dollars on inferior, unproven products like the Common Core state standards and accompanying unreliable, invalid assessments. The Regents Diploma from the state of New York is still one of the most respected high school diplomas in the country. A high school diploma received in the state of New York has always set the exceptional standard, never conformed to a common standard. Thanks for your time.
I'm going to just make one brief comment. I do concur wholeheartedly with you on your beginning thoughts. Demonizing people in education is a waste of time. It's imprudent. It's unfair. And I believe that the governor in particular has an obligation as the chief executive of the state to raise the level of the dialogue. There's no question that we have major challenges all across the state of New York, but while I think it's fair to point out where the problems are and where some of those solutions may lie, I also think whether it's in Camden or Westmoreland, I'm pretty sure that we can pick out kids like Megan and show a lot of the things that are going right. Fair to talk about the things that need to change, but if you're going to go down that path, we have a corresponding obligation to make sure that people understand a lot of the good things that are going on. She's next, and then I'll come to you. Please.
Thank you for being here this evening. My name is Lisa Matt, and I speak to you as the mother of an 8th grade girl. Please pray for me.
It's the first thing I thought of. Been there, done that.
She has always been a very strong and active student. we have always been involved. Parents were active with her education, we're active with the school. Our superintendent and board president are here. I serve on a committee with them. I am not against Common Core in concept, so you need to know that ahead of time. However, as soon as she came home with her integrated algebra first assignment and had to watch a video of a man coming down a ladder in order to learn the concept of the slope of a line, it became immediately apparent to me that no more will someone who is not very strong in ELA skills be able to make it up in the math and science area. I actually began college as an engineering student. My husband works in manufacturing, so math is something that we're very familiar with. She wanted to be a veterinarian. I'm sure she'll go through many different iterations. She now has said maybe she'd like to be an astronomer because she wants to find out what's up there, how does it work, where does it begin, where does it end. She's inquisitive. There's a recent study that came out. As a librarian, I will be happy to get you the citation because it just came to me while I was sitting here listening to everyone speak. And generally speaking, girls are socialized to believe that a skill is either inherent or you don't have it. So when you suddenly come up to an 8th grade transition, which is already hormonally charged, and it's a difficult transition year, and suddenly we're doing integrated algebra 1, and she comes home and says to me, I hate math. My heart broke. She's never expressed this before. I hate math. I can't stand math. Why? Earth science is all math. Why am I doing this? And suddenly she's believing that she just can't do it. It's a new teaching. So I feel like the definition of college and career ready, I need to do some homework and talk to my superintendent. What is college and career ready? Because I do believe you do have to have a broad education, and the arts are phenomenal in her life, and we're happy for that. But she also needs math and science, and without the strong ELA, some children will be left behind, no doubt. So the point of the story is, all along, she was doing well. She was doing well on her standardized tests, and I don't expect perfection. She's had fantastic classroom experiences, just like everyone else here has talked about. Fantastic teachers. But she's suddenly coming home to me after having won the Principal's Award last year in junior high and saying, I don't want to go to school tomorrow. I don't want to go to math class. It's not the teacher's fault. She loves the teachers. And I just wanted to share that story with you. My heart is broken, but I'm not an opponent, and I would like to help do what I can to slow the process down so she's not stuck in the middle. She can take 2 Regents exams. One of them will be taken in March. The school year's not over. So any help you can throw us, I would appreciate it.
I have to listen to you. My wife's name is Lisa. So I have to fundamentally listen to you. And you know, these are all heartfelt stories and they're real. But I honestly, though you say something, I remember my kids doing this. Ashley's the girl, Sean and Jake are the boys, and she used to say, girls rule and boys drool. So that was her standard, but thank you for your comments.
My name's Lisa Adolfi.
Oh, here we go again.
Now that I got your attention as well.
Yes, whatever you say, dear.
I am a mother, a grandmother. I have 20 plus years as an aide for special education. My specialty is autism. Just because they can't speak doesn't mean they can't learn. When my daughter brought this to my attention, my first question was, what about special ed? What about every child left behind? Because my fear is my very smart 7-year-old grandson who's sitting for 90 minutes a day doing math is suddenly going to become antsy, and they're going to label him. So where does that leave him? As a mother, I don't have a college education. Doesn't mean I'm not smart. I, at 19, gave birth to that very smart child. Where we're going with this wealth in education, I'm not sure. I raised 4 honor roll students, most of the time as a single parent at a poverty level, without a college education. My husband is a laborer, which is 50% of Americans. My daughter next year will be taking the 11th grade curriculum in ELA. I'm not sure if you've all looked over this book list. She will not be reading your pornographic material that is on this list. I am an advocate. It takes a community to raise a child, and I'm happy to see. I'm disappointed as well that there's not more, but happy that you have brought this to a community level. Because when she brought this to my attention, my first response was, please write to Mr. Griffo. And I thank you for bringing this here.
Hey, listen, this is Senator Griffo, and I have to tell, I think this is a very good turnout. You know, I go to tons of meetings, so. As soon as you said you were a grandmother, I'm like, wow.
Yeah, because I chose at 19.
Okay.
To give
Hey.
up my college education.
You know what? It seems like it worked out pretty well. So.
You can't put a time limit on this, though. I'm interested in what that young man has to say.
You know what? He's going to be the last one.
We are going to meet with the young man. I'm going to ask you all to please, you know, we need to be respectful because I do have to, he's got a long journey ahead of him, and I think this was a great idea. That's why I wanted to do this. So I'd ask the adults right now to just be succinct, and then we can try to do that. We're actually meeting with the students, and I want that opportunity for them too, if you can just let us have that chance too. So that's where we can have that one-on-one, okay?
Yes, sir. I'm not Lisa.
Superintendent?
Okay.
My name is Kathy.
I'm going to listen anyway.
I'm superintendent at New York Mills, and I would like to thank, I have board member representation, parent representation, teacher representation, my teacher association president, and my school support organizations represented here tonight. So I'd like to thank all of them for being here and helping to fill the crowd. And I'm here on their behalf. I will not talk to you about Common Core. I think you've heard probably enough for tonight. And I think you're very brave and very patient to come and listen. We thank you for that. But 2 things. We've been following you. We came to Rome when you were here, and we took a look at your action plan, not yours personally, but the commission's. And there are 2 areas that we are most interested in. First of all, the pre-K.
Yep.
We know you're in support of that, and we ask, just as Jeff asked earlier, Jeff Simons from Rome, to please not only fund it fully, but fund it for all districts, because those of us that are not considered very poor, we're below the 1.0, but we are not considered poor. We need funding to start it up, and we've looked at it 4 times now, and the board would very much like to do so, but we really need the funding. And secondly, in your plan, you talk about consolidation. And of course, New York Mills being a district of just over 600 children, we're afraid. We feel we do a great job, we have a wonderful product, and we feel that small is better in our case, and we would like to keep it that way. So when you're working with the commission and with the governor, please keep that in mind, that we feel that that is quality for us. Thank you.
You're welcome. I just want to briefly comment. The members of the Education Reform Commission, present company accepted, have a tremendous diversity of background and a wealth of experience. And to coalesce behind certain ideas, you can imagine, you know, if I just said in this room, let's all agree on something or some things, that would take some time. So in terms of pre-K, part of our challenge, and I could dance around this, but you deserve straight answers. I'm not sure I know anybody who would say, oh, you know, pre-K is not a good idea. Pre-K is a good idea. The earlier you educate children, the more you get them involved, the more you have them in a community setting, everybody knows the value of that. Part of our challenge is, where do we direct our money? Now, I mentioned in the beginning, see if everyone still remembers, the GEA. A lot of what your school districts want, and I respect it, is they're basically saying, look, stop telling us what to do. Give us the money. We'll figure out how to do it. We know what we're doing. We're competent. We're professionals. So we have a push me, pull you on things like that, because people will advocate for pre-K, and then we have to figure out, well, should we give more money to schools to help eliminate the GEA, or should we give more money for pre-K? That's part of our ongoing dilemma, and I think we will have more work coming out of the commission on that. So go ahead, please.
My name is Kimberly Graham, and I am a special ed teacher. And I'm having a problem with what we're doing this year because it's trying to put a square peg in a round hole. We are not putting the children first. The pace is too rigorous for the modules, and there are no accommodations for students with disabilities. Not only that, but the developmentally inappropriateness of the topics is crazy. I don't know if you've seen what's on Engage New York with the modules, but to teach them about the War of 1812 in their listening and learning strand, or Hinduism, when they don't know if they're from Camden or Taberg, and they don't know the difference between a city or a state, and they move between Rome and Camden and Verona and Sherrill. For them to sit there, it's a blank stare. We're talking about a long-term effect. Now, the teachers have become robots adhering to the script. There must be something that is tied to the adapt, adopt, or ignore. I don't know if it's just the fear of being unsuccessful on the test or if there's money involved. But the money that has been spent to purchase modules and the materials for the modules, and then knowing you can only use 10 frames to teach math a certain way, when last year the kids knew they could do bundles of straws, but that doesn't come until module 4. And then having the modules not even up and prepared on the website, and we have to be ready to roll in September when the kids start. There is a learning gap. Not only do my students have a learning gap because they have learning disabilities, now there's a 2-year gap in their learning because of what we're doing. So in 2nd grade, they haven't had the module for grade 1. They haven't had the module for kindergarten. But we have to be ready to roll the first day of school with what the module says for math, and they don't know what they're doing. We've had kids regressing, wetting the bed at night, not wanting to come to school, throwing up. To me, this is not making them career and college ready because they say they don't want to come to school. I got into teaching to help students learn, and I feel unsuccessful on a daily basis. And I have parents coming to me saying, we know that you're doing the best that you can with what you have. Unfortunately, what I have is not what I know in my heart or my head that I went to college for, that I got my master's degree, that I'm still pursuing my learning for. It's not right. And somehow, some way, this needs to get back. A change has to be made, and it can't be in a few weeks or months or in a year or two and just see how things come out. It has to be now. These kids are suffering on a daily basis.
Kimberly, I do want to ask you a question. And I want to make a comment first. You raise an excellent point and a very salient point. It took me a while to really wrap my head around the concept of a cohort. Okay, and figure out what does a cohort mean? Is it kids from 9 to 12? When do you start? How does it work? Is it over a whole educational time frame? I think one of the real legitimate problems is, even if you agree with Common Core, and even if you agree with the implementation, the kid who is going in 9th grade is going to have to take that Regents at some point pretty quickly. They're only getting 1 year, as opposed to the kid who's going to be starting in 2nd grade, and by the time they get there, they'll have 7 years. So that is something that we have consistently heard complaints about. Second, your students have IEPs, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. This is my understanding. You tell me if I'm wrong. And we, to a degree, we as a state have our hands tied because there are certain requirements about taking the tests that come from the federal government. Okay, so some of those changes are not only mandated and dictated by the federal government, but if they're going to change, it's got to happen there. As much as we may say we don't agree, unless they make a change at the federal level, we're stuck with it. My real question to you is, in terms of children who are taking an exam, it's my understanding that pursuant to your IEP that you are supposed to have accommodations.
That is correct. However, that's high stakes test. But on a day-to-day basis, their learning is restricted. So yeah, on a test, for a math test, I can read it to them, but that does no good in the weeks or months that they've been learning about it, because the instruction is not provided in a way that's good for them. Whole group for 90 minutes for a second grader, it doesn't work. I don't know if anyone that was involved in making the modules ever was in a classroom or has been in one since, or would love to come and visit, because I would be more than happy to have you come in and see how many centimeter cubes are flung across the room because the kids don't know what to do with them, but they're fun to play with people. Okay. I can I can accommodate a test by reading it aloud to them. But on a day-to-day basis, because the modules are so blocked for their time, I can't pull and do small group for resource as much as their IEPs need. So now I have to do paperwork, not that I have to do paperwork, but I have to submit a request to get their IEP changed to meet what the classroom can meet, not what the student needs. So no longer is it an individualized educational plan, it's a how can we fit your services to meet the modules that are being taught in the classroom.
Okay. Thank you very much.
My name is Alicia Lippert, and I'll spare you my background since I'm the last one speaking. And I will reassure your aide that I will not go through all of these papers. However, I received an email to come tonight, which means I was invited. And the rest of these people received some kind of notice that they were invited. And to be told by an aide that we must push along is not very nice as a host.
I think what we accomplished here tonight is something very significant. And I wanted the public to have an opportunity to interact with some of the decision makers.
It has not yet been even 2 hours.
I know that, but we told everybody it was 6:30 to 8 o'clock because we have people traveling long distances. We're trying to get as many people involved as possible.
Maybe he needs
so
a
the
room.
aides were just asking to please be succinct.
I will.
We don't need, if you want to submit written testimony, we can take that.
I'm not going to take
and we want to
that.
get as many people as possible to get involved. So we don't want anyone to monopolize the process. So we're being respectful.
Anything which has already been said.
So we want to hear people's opinions. We want you to express your emotions. It's all a part of it. So you should not be offended. You should be appreciative, really, that people are here and willing to listen and want to hear what people are saying.
Yeah. We were
I know. I invited everybody through the media.
Yeah.
So if you were invited, it was mass. Everybody in this entire region. We have people from Lewis County. How many Lewis County people still here? Lewis County are here. We have people from St. Lawrence County, from Central New York.
And they should be
And Long Island.
And Long Island. So please ask your question because we want them to meet with the students too.
I am also from Long Island. One of my comments would be, is anyone taking notes? Is this gentleman your staff member?
No, everything is recorded.
And so you will be able to go through everything people have said because they've said so many wonderful things. And I'm going to reduce, this is a packet that I received single-spaced from the teachers in my school district. And I'm going to put it into one sentence. I cannot in good conscience utilize something that is fundamentally wrong. They are telling me that the modules are full of mistakes, typos. They have to redo them. They cannot work with them. I think the question was asked before, how many educators were on the committee that chose to do this?
Let me, I'm going to just offer a couple of comments relating to what you just talked about. And whatever you want to submit in writing, we'll certainly take.
I just need to add one more thing.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Is it true that there is only one vendor approved in New York State from which to purchase these modules?
That answer, I told you in the beginning, if I don't know an answer, I'm not going to say, I'm not going to make it up. I'm not sure.
Right.
I'm more than happy to find out. That's probably pretty easy.
As a board member, I've been repeatedly told this, that there is one vendor. That locks us into a monopoly.
You know what? If that's accurate, I would agree with your last comment. Okay. I'm not sure. Certainly, Pearson does work with the State Education Department. There are plenty of companies that do work with the Education Department. I don't want to misspeak. My guess, though, is they're probably not the only one. If I'm wrong, fine. we'll make sure that we get you
I would appreciate
an
if you
appropriate
would
answer.
follow that up, because I can think of no other area where there are no options. That you must have this Common Core and you must use these modules, and there's only one place which is approved.
Okay, back to your point. I'm continuing to do a lot of traveling. And right, wrong, or otherwise, I have a very good memory. And I'm not saying I remember everything, but we memorialize all the stuff that we get. We can go back and look at this stuff. We had a 5-hour hearing today. So I sat through, well, 5.5 hours of testimony, and we were actually talking on our way over here with my staff. They had missed part of it. I said, well, you can go right back to the tape.
I wasn't sure if this was public access or if this was your own staff recording this.
This is, these folks work for the Senate. They work with us in the Senate. And there was a media here before, so, I mean, we're in a public building, so it's certainly a public forum. And I believe, I don't like speaking for my colleagues, but I believe in earnest and with great sincerity that Senator Griffo will be following up with me. And you know, we're out of Albany right now, but at some point we'll be going back. And I will say this, there is no shortage of opinions. Not only here, but in all the places we're going, which is fine. I mean, what the heck, that's how you learn. You come and you listen to what people have to say. And listening, I think about a teacher who deals with children in special education. I talk about a mom, very compelling story about how she got her master's degree. I'm thinking about Megan, because I have a niece named Megan who wants to go to Geneseo and wants to go to SUNY school. Brittany, listening to her mom, and so we're trying.
Well, I have to compliment you on two things. One, remembering names, and two, admitting that you are in charge of the gap elimination plan. That's very brave.
Well, I would only say this as a logical extension of that. If the governor comes to us with his proposed budget and he doesn't do anything to help fix the GEA, that makes it a lot harder for us. He took positive steps this year. We built on what he did. But
it does not equal what we had 10 years ago. We are still below 10 years ago. I mean, you mentioned that you put back $1 billion, but it was more than $1 billion that was taken away.
Right,
so
and I will respectfully say this.
It's a good point.
No, but listen, people can disagree with me, and I don't mind if people disagree with me on the facts. I have a list of every school district that Senator Griffo represents. I have the state aid for the last 10 years. I have the change in enrollment for the last 10 years. So every district in this room is getting more money than they got 10 years ago. And I have all the numbers if you want to take a look at it.
I would
grant you that the last couple of 09 and 010, certainly. And I will say this, Westmoreland, looking at their numbers, of a lot of the schools, their percentage increase has been amongst the lowest, and their enrollment has changed. So when I come to events like this, I like to know what I'm talking about, because if I know what the combined wealth ratio is, I know what the...
I'm not from Westmoreland. Is your enrollment higher or lower?
Than 10 years ago, it's lower.
Lower.
I got the sheet right there.
We have the same report. Okay. So I just want to be sure that for all the effort people went through this evening, that there will be follow-up by staff and by you viewing this again, that other people will understand these are not complaints. This is angst. This is frustration from the heart. These people are worried about their children, whether it's their own personal children or their classrooms. They love what they do.
Or their grandchildren.
They love what they do, and they feel that it's being destroyed.
Right, but as somewhat related to what you're saying, you mentioned you are either a school board member or were.
I am and was also an educator for 34 years.
Okay, so if you are a school board member, I would, first of all, thank you for your service, and say that as you try to have your own meetings and then follow up and be responsive to the residents in your school district, that's exactly what we do. Just sometimes on a bigger level.
We don't see any result from what our input is. We say, we hear, we will look into this, but we don't see any changes.
You know what? I completely disagree. Completely. We have, I'll just talk about state aid. It's the actions of the people in this room. I see a number of superintendents and educators. Your advocacy, your collective advocacy, helped make a difference in the budget this year. There have been a number of changes that have been advocated by school board members, by the School Boards Association. If you want to talk about some of the things that are going on right now, then change is fine. But to suggest that there have been no changes and no reflection of people's comments in terms of what we do, I'm just not going to agree.
Well, I respectfully disagree.
And you know what? You are certainly entitled to do that.
Will we see some feedback as to how these comments?
You know what? I'm fairly confident that I represented to you that already. So I'll just repeat. The simple answer is yes.
All right, thank you very much. Let me identify the staff who are with us tonight. First of all, from the Senate, Senator Flanagan's office and the Senate Education Committee, say hi. I think Carl's here and Robin is here. They're with Senator Flanagan, and they were at the hearing this morning. From my office, Ryan, Dwight, and Brian. They're in the So if you'd like, you know, before the end of the evening to see one of them, they're going to be here. As far as testimony, Senator Flanagan, to the committee, can anyone submit written testimony? So we can let you know how to do that. If you want to submit something to become a formal part of the record of the Senate Committee on Education and these hearings that are being held, we will give you the way to do that so you can have your written testimony submitted and put as part of the record, correct? Okay, so that can be done. So I'll let you, if you would like to close, because I know we want to get together with some of the students. If you want to say anything else there, Mr. Chairman?
I would say a couple of very basic things. First of all, thank you. All kidding aside, I always feel like that I'm very welcome when I come up here. And frankly, that makes it a lot easier to come back. So I will keep coming back. I will keep working with my colleagues. Some of what I said before, I'll repeat. There is nothing more important and more effective than having a good teacher in front of the classroom. The more we have, the better off we all are. Our obligation to you is to listen, to act, and in many respects, get you as much money as possible to make your local lives a little easier. I'm not suggesting for a moment that we do it perfectly, but I think we are making very good strides, and I will close by reiterating again that Senator Griffo and I work together very closely. He is a passionate advocate on your behalf. Sometimes you don't have to yell and scream to get your point across. He does it very effectively by being Joe. So, Joe, thank you.
I would like to thank Superintendent Migliori and Board President Acey for your hospitality tonight, for your willingness to host us here tonight. Mr. Medelman from BOCES, who is with us tonight. And I want to thank all of you, Assemblyman Blankenbush. I want to thank all of you for being here tonight because this is important. And I want to really express my appreciation to Senator Flanagan because, as I indicated, it's been a long day. But to show you that he really does care and that he's willing to listen and to do the best that we can, it may not be to what everybody would like to see or how they would like to see it, but to think that you have individuals who are truly willing to engage, to listen, and to try to improve things. I think that is something important, and I know that as chair of the Education Committee, he has been that type of chairman and that type of leader where he will do the best to his ability based upon the interaction that he has through the communities across this state to do something to make things better and to do things differently. Now remember, we have 212 members of the legislature, we have an executive and the governor that we have to deal with, you have a board of regents, so when you talk about are we going to have a quick fix or an easy answer to something, probably not. But what can we do to change things? Many of us would like to see substantive and dramatic changes in a lot of areas. But the key here is can we do things differently because you've identified issues and expressed concerns. That's what we have to work on. And I think that we can and we're willing to do that. And I want to thank you all again because the idea that I had here was to try to bring some of the key players in Albany because we've talked on a regular basis, many of you, one-on-one, officially, professionally, with superintendents, board members. But I thought it's important to include in this environment, this type of setting. And I apologize if you felt it was too short and we were moving people along, but it's very difficult to do because we're trying to bring very busy people on very important issues into a different setup. That's what this is. Many of them, you can go testify at a hearing and you can appear at meetings. We have a lot of meetings, right, Howard? On a regular basis, but I wanted an interactive kind of environment, and for the chairman to agree, I really appreciate that. And actually, go ahead, yeah, he deserves it. This is a true leader in our state, a true leader in our state. And next week on Monday, we'll have Commissioner King in Whitesboro, and Assemblyman Brindisi will join me there, and we're going to do something similar. And we're going to try to, yeah, Blankenbush gets off next week, so, but Assemblyman Brindisi and I will both be there on Monday, and we're going to need to continue to move it along on that day too, but we want to express our opinions to the Commissioner, and we want to do it in a respectful manner. We want to make sure that he hears what our concerns are and has more sensitivity to the frustrations that many of you are experiencing, and hopefully as a result of this type of dialogue that we will see changes and we will have their attention and things can be different and better. That's the objective and the hope. And so, sure.
We had the hearing today. The hearing will be up before. So you can, the commissioner was the first to testify. He's coming next week, as Griffo indicated. He has an hour of testimony to answer questions. Anyone who wants to look, you can certainly do that. And the last thing I just wanted to add to Senator Griffo's voice, I think it's very important. Whenever you pass along to us, thank you, you pass along to the governor as well. You know, it's a three-legged chair in Albany, and it's a shared responsibility. Everyone's very good at jumping up to take credit, but this is shared responsibility on a lot of different things. And the governor does have regional representatives throughout the state. Where I come from, Scott Martell is the regional representative, and periodically I drive him crazy because I tell people to call him. He works for the governor, so you should do the same. The concerns that you have, you should echo them and mirror them with the executive. We're certainly listening, we'll continue to do so, but I really believe it's extremely important to do that.
And we do have a new member in the governor's office in this area. That is a regional director in our office, can give you the information on that too. If you, my staff that's here, we can get you a way to communicate with them. They have an office in the state office building in Utica. So also this will be put on, I think we can put this on the web, correct? So we will have this actually on too so that you'll be able to see it. If you visit our websites and the Senate website, you'll be able to see that too. Again, I sincerely thank you for your interest and your willingness to come out tonight, and I hope I was doing something that we'll continue to do to get the community involved. So thank you all. We're going to go see the students.